Ash is a Pokemon trainer that has caught a lot of Pokemon, with all of them having pretty interesting stories. From the major rises and falls, Ash has been with them throughout everything. So I've decided to take a look at every single one of Ash's original Kanto Pokemon and explain their lore. From Pokemon like Charizard having one of the greatest stories, to even Pokemon that weren't around for a long time like Mankey, they are all here. So let's start off in order with the ace of Ash's team, Pikachu. This story starts before Pikachu even met Ash, when he was just a Pichu. When Pikachu was a baby Pokemon, he was all alone, abandoned by his group because his electricity was unpredictable and uncontrollable. While Pikachu was roaming around by himself, he bumped into a group of Coughings, which ended up poisoning him and dropping him down a mountain, where he landed into the arms of a Kangaskhan. And ever since then, they were locked in. Kangaskhan treated Pichu as one of her own, since Pichu was a baby Pokemon that was abandoned and it would be cruel to just leave him out by himself. Pichu also considered these Kangaskhan's his family, since they ended up bonding really well together after traveling for so long, and even considering the baby Kangaskhan its little brother. Even though everything seemed fine, there was one major problem the mother Kangaskhan was hiding from Pichu. And it's the fact that mother Kangaskhan's are only meant to be taking care of one baby Pokemon. The mother Kangaskhan was getting really tired carrying around two baby Pokemon and even having to split the food resources amongst two Pokemon. And Pichu started taking note of this and even started feeling really bad for being around the Kangaskhan and tried to leave, but the mother Kangaskhan, regardless of all this, still wanted to take care of Pichu and would never let him leave since she realized that he needs a home. Later that night, Kangaskhan brought Pichu and her baby into a cave so they could get some rest, and that night Pichu made the tough decision. Pichu thought that he would be better off leaving them so that the baby Kangaskhan could get all the nourishment and attention that it needs, and Pichu should just go back to the wild. So sadly that night, that's what Pichu did. He left his brother and mother without saying anything and just waved goodbye. And through all this emotional build-up, the Pichu evolved into the Pikachu that we know and love today, because Pichus evolved through their happiness level, and Pikachu was feeling a lot of grave emotion while leaving his mother. So fast forwarding a bit between now and the first episode of the first Pokemon anime, which is about 6 years, Professor Oak catches Pikachu. And on Ash's first day for becoming a Pokemon trainer, he misses the opportunity to get his starter Pokemon, and he gets left with Pikachu, and he was held off for a reason. I don't know what Pikachu saw between leaving Kangaskhan and now, but he's very angry and doesn't have the same personality. He's just stubborn and useless and doesn't want anything to do with Ash, and he also gained a bit of weight. On their first adventure, Ash and Pikachu were roaming around and they encounter a Sparrow. Pikachu uses Thunder Shock on the Sparrow, and Sparrow is a sore loser and calls his gang to back them up. And these Sparrows have shooters because the second they caught up to Pikachu, they jumped him and tried to kill him. Even though Ash just met Pikachu, he vows to save Pikachu from this situation, but Pikachu doesn't care about Ash and tries to run ahead but gets jumped even more. Ash picks up Pikachu, who got knocked out by the Sparrows, and jumps down a river so the Sparrows wouldn't follow them. At the end of this river, they end up meeting Misty, and Misty sees Pikachu's condition and says they immediately need a doctor. But in the corner of Ash's eyes, the Sparrows are still chasing after these kids, so Ash steals Misty's bike to try to get away, and I didn't know Ash was cold like this. While Ash is riding this bike, it starts raining and Pikachu is holding on to his dear life. The Sparrows are still chasing this 10-year-old kid and a dying rodent. The Sparrows catch up to Ash and start pecking him, which makes him fall off the cliff and lose the bike. Pikachu also falls off the bike and has no energy left. Ash is out of all his options, except one. Put Pikachu back inside of his Pokeball. If you didn't know, Pikachu absolutely hates going inside his Pokeball since he hates being isolated and alone and feeling like he's abandoned. But Ash begs Pikachu to get inside the Pokeball, and if he does, he'll never have to get inside of it again. He just wants to save Pikachu's life. While the Sparrows are closing in on them, Ash gets up and vows to protect Pikachu even if it costs him his life. And when all hope was lost and the Sparrows are about to do the finishing blows, Pikachu, instead of getting inside the Pokeball, jumps on top of Ash's shoulder and shows us the true power that he has inside, using a move to simultaneously wipe out all the Sparrows. This Pikachu is OP. In the process of this, Pikachu ended up frying Misty's bike, but when they woke up, there was a rainbow over their head and the legendary Pokemon Ho-Ho was gracing them. And ever since then, Ash and Pikachu were locked in. Pikachu respected Ash and Ash respected Pikachu. From this point forward, Pikachu is Ash's star Pokemon, and they went on to catch loads of friends and defeat Brock to get the Pewter City Gym Badge and Misty to get the Cerulean Gym Badge. Pikachu was also very smart versing Brock. Since he had the type disadvantage, he set off the sprinklers, and when there was water, all over Onix, he zapped him and won the battle. Everything was looking up until Ash and Pikachu versed the third gym leader, Lieutenant Surge. The star Pokemon of the third gym is Raichu, the evolution to Pikachu. And when Ash went up against his Raichu for the first time, they got absolutely bodied. Pikachu saw the gap in power between a Pikachu and a Raichu. Lieutenant Surge told them straight to their face the only way they're gonna beat him is by evolving this weak Pikachu into a Raichu so he can unlock his true power. When Pikachu was in the hospital after his brutal defeat, Nurse Joy actually came up to Ash and gave him a Thunderstone, letting him know that this is the only way to evolve Pikachu to a Raichu by touching this stone. Ash was left with a pretty tough decision if he wants to evolve Pikachu, but he was gonna make it be a group decision and get Pikachu's input. When Ash presented the idea to Pikachu, he was more for pushing the idea of evolution, but then Pikachu had a major prep talk with Ash, basically saying that he wants to win by his own power and slap the Thunderstone out of Ash's hands. Well, technically Pikachu hit Ash's hands, since if he touched the Thunderstone at all, he would have evolved. Ash and Pikachu figured out that for Raichu to be so strong, he had to sacrifice something, and he sacrificed his speed. So when they came back for round 2, they knew exactly how to counter Raichu, which they did, and they ended up winning the battle, proving that Pikachu is just as strong as Raichu, if not stronger. This revelation was important to Pikachu since he never really wanted to evolve into Raichu, and many future opportunities are presented to him to evolve, but ultimately he always stays the lovable Pikachu that he is. And that would be the end of that, right? Pikachu figures out that he always wants to be a Pikachu and wants to travel along Ash's journey, but there is a hiccup along the way. In a later episode where Ash and Pikachu are traveling through a forest, Pikachu ends up saving a baby Pikachu from dying in a river. Because of this, the group of Pikachus in this forest praise Ash's Pikachu for his heroic efforts. Pikachu started hanging out with them a lot more, and they really respected Ash's Pikachu, even initiating him as one of their leaders. And Ash was taking notice of this, but not in a good way. He was getting a little bit jealous that Pikachu was spending a lot of time with them, but he also wanted the best for Pikachu, so Ash made a very impulsive decision. That night, without even discussing it to Pikachu fully, he just tells Pikachu he's gonna leave him here so he can spend time with the Pikachus in the wild, since that's where he belongs, and he's gonna leave and continue his journey. Brock and Misty were super confused by Ash's actions, and Pikachu was the most confused, since yeah, he did like the wild Pikachus, but Ash was always his #1 priority. So while Ash was leaving in a pretty emotional scene, Pikachu subverted his expectations by deciding to come along with Ash, and the wild Pikachu ended up saying goodbye to our Pikachu. It was a really heartwarming scene, and it proved that Ash and Pikachu's bond cannot be broken. This was proven even further in the Pokemon movie, where, if you didn't know, Ash died and got turned to stone, but Pikachu and the rest of the Pokemon's tears were so powerful that it was able to dissolve Ash from turning into stone and bring him back to life. After all that, through thick and thin, Ash and Pikachu were able to gather all 8 gym badges so they'd be able to enter the Indigo League while having stalkers on their tail. But I'll make a video on these guys later. After this, Ash and Pikachu entered the Indigo League, and as most of us know, Ash lost it, and he went into a pretty depressive slump. But the only Pokemon that was able to cheer Ash up and make him bounce back from this depressive slump was Pikachu, kind of a full circle of their entire journey, since in episode 1, it was Ash dedicating himself to Pikachu, and now in this final episode, Pikachu fully dedicated himself to Ash. Ash committed to going to the Orange Islands, which is another part in the Kanto region, and they even won the tournament there, and that seems to be the end of Ash and Pikachu's journey in the Kanto region. Next up, we have an OG and one of the first Pokemon that Ash ever caught, Caterpie. While Ash is traveling through Viridian Forest, he ends up encountering a Caterpie, the first Pokemon he's ever encountered in the wild. He threw the Pokeball straight at the bug, no battling or anything, and Caterpie actually decided to stay in the Pokeball, making Caterpie Ash's first Pokemon ever. Ash was pretty hyped about this, running around Misty, super excited about this achievement, and it really does make me miss the simpler times in the Pokemon anime where this is something huge. There was one main problem though. Misty was absolutely disgusted that Ash caught this Pokemon, telling him to keep that Pokeball away from her since she hates bugs. Ash thinks Misty is just playing around, so he sends out the Caterpie and Misty runs away. Caterpie sees Misty in the distance and tries to cuddle up with her, but Misty just hates this Pokemon. To make things even worse, Misty goes ahead and picks up Pikachu, saying that this Pokemon is cute and that Caterpie is ugly, which makes Caterpie start to cry, and Ash takes Caterpie's side, telling Misty she's being way too mean to this Pokemon. They decide to set up camp in the woods, and when all the humans went to sleep, Caterpie and Pikachu end up having a pretty in-depth conversation. Caterpie lets Pikachu know that he cannot wait to evolve into a Metapod and then a Butterfree, since when he's a Butterfree, he'll have wings and be free, being able to fly around the night. Pikachu reassures Caterpie that he'll one one day make it there. In the morning, Misty is still tripping about Caterpie being out of the Pokeball. It gets so bad to the point where Caterpie gets depressed and goes inside its Pokeball because it feels like it's unwanted. Ash gets pretty mad at Misty, but while this is all happening, they get jumped by a Pidgeotto. They end up having a battle and Ash sends out Caterpie, and Caterpie actually ends up losing this pretty badly. When he was knocked out though, Pidgeotto was still going into attack, so Ash returned Caterpie, but I do wonder, was this Pokemon trying to kill Caterpie? While this is all going on, Team Rocket comes trying to jump Ash and steal Pikachu, but Ash actually ends up using Caterpie to defeat Team Rocket. This Pokemon ended up using Slingshot to create a ball around Coughing and Ekans and knocking them away, blasting off Team Rocket. After Caterpie won its first Pokemon battle, it had enough experience to evolve into a Metapod, and it evolved pretty uniquely by encasing itself in its string. And this is just another charm of the early season of the Pokemon anime because evolutions used to be so unique. With Ash's newly evolved Pokemon, they were off to conquer Viridian Forest, and they ended up encountering a samurai. This samurai said he tested all the previous trainers from Palatons, the people that picked up Charmander, Squrtile, and Bulbasaur. And it does get me thinking, why did we never see these trainers fully in the anime? All we know is that Gary picked up Squrtile, but I think it would be pretty cool if we ended up meeting Green or potentially Red? I don't know, but with all that on the line, Ash was challenging a pretty formidable opponent, so they both sent out their Pokemon to have the most iconic battle yet, Metapod versus Metapod. They sit there menacingly, using Harden and not attacking each other. The pure determination is outmatched. Which Metapod will win? Metapod 1 using Harden versus Metapod 2. Their aura is so powerful, it even ends up knocking out the trainers around them. We have never seen a Pokemon battle this intense in the entire anime, and their raw power was so strong it ended up attracting a swarm of Beedrills to come over and attack them. In the process of all this, one of the Beedrills ends up stealing Ash's Metapod, flying away with it. This Pokemon truly got kidnapped because an entire night passed with Ash stressing about where his Pokemon was. In the morning, when Ash woke up, he ended up finding Metapod attached to a tree to a bunch of Kakunas. Ash ended up trying to save Metapod, but the Beedrills went in trying to attack him. When Ash finally made it to Metapod, Metapod didn't want to get inside the Pokeball. Metapod felt completely betrayed by Ash since he didn't come looking for him sooner. Ash started to realize that he low-key wasn't a good trainer, and it was a bad look since Ash saved all his other Pokemon, not this one, so Metapod has the right to feel mad. Ash ended up apologizing to Metapod, and Metapod forgave Ash, but a Beedrill was coming in to attack the both of them, and before the Beedrill was about to hit Ash right in the face with a needle, Metapod jumped in the way and got hit head-on with the Beedrill's needle. A detail a lot of people seem to miss from this is Beedrill's hand literally broke off and left a literal hole inside a Metapod. I don't know if Beedrill's arms grow back or something, but this has to be the first amputation in the Pokemon anime. Because there was a big hole left inside a Metapod, he ended up glowing and evolving into Butterfree, the final evolution of this line. Ash was so happy about this, he told Butterfree to use Sleep Powder, and Butterfree put all the Beedrills to sleep, even Team Rocket, so this Butterfree is not to be messed around with. With all that being said, everyone was so happy that Ash finally had a fully evolved Pokemon, but little did everybody know that this happiness may fade away very quickly. For a while, Ash just used Butterfree as a regular Pokemon, traveling on gay ventures and even helping Ash get a Cerulean Gym badge against Staryu. Everything was honestly looking amazing until Ash, Brock, and Misty ended up traveling and meeting a group of Butterfree celebrating their festival of love. Basically, once a year, a bunch of trainers go on hot air balloons and release their Butterfrees out in the wild so they can all mate and have babies across the sea. Ash was a little put off by this, but he sent out his Butterfree to scope out the area to see if he found anybody he liked, and Butterfree ended up instantly finding attraction to this pink Butterfree. Now, don't even ask me why this Butterfree is pink, I'm just gonna assume it's some type of mutation because this is not a shiny Butterfree. Our Butterfree started showing off his social skills, dancing in front of the other Butterfree, trying to make her get with him, but then in the end, the pink Butterfree did not rock with our guy and slapped him across the face. Because of our Butterfree getting rejected, he ended up taking the black pill and leaving, feeling depressed, not wanting to interact with anyone anymore. Everyone tried to cheer Butterfree up, but he was super depressed because he didn't know why he got rejected, but sometimes that just happens in life. Pikachu even tried to give Butterfree some good advice to cheer up, but it wasn't working. He still felt so sad, but I really think Pikachu should have told Butterfree to hit the subscribe button because I feel like it would make him instantly more happier seeing new videos every week. Brock ended up getting an idea to give Butterfree some new drip, so he put a yellow ribbon around Butterfree's neck and said that he should have more confidence since he looks a lot better and a lot more different than the other Butterfrees. Butterfree got encouraged by this and went back up to go try to talk to the pink Butterfree again, and it wasn't really working. She wasn't impressed by him doing all these cool tricks and moves, and she just really didn't find him attractive. Just when our Butterfree was about to give up, Team Rocket pulled up and stole every single Butterfree and put them in a huge net. Because Ash's Butterfree already knew the drill, he ended up saving everybody and broke them all out, and because of this courageous action, the pink Butterfree ended up falling in love all of a sudden with our Butterfree. Now, hey, maybe she didn't know that this Butterfree had a cool side to him, but it's a bit fishy. With all that being said and done though, Butterfree finally did it. He got the girl he wanted. Everything was looking up until everyone had the cool realization. With Butterfree getting his new girlfriend, it just means some doors will have to close, and the door that's being closed is Butterfree traveling with Ash. Since all the other Butterfrees are going to travel across the ocean and make their new life abroad, there's no room for Butterfree to be with the trainer anymore. Ash got really sad about this, but he didn't want to hold Butterfree back, so he tried to stay strong. He kept up a happy face, letting Butterfree know that it's okay and that he can leave, and he'll just tell the other Pokemon that he's on a little trip and Butterfree will be back soon, eventually, right? Butterfree ended up accepting Ash's words and flying away with his new partner, and even Pikachu started crying and Ash started getting a wave of sadness, and one of the saddest Pokemon montages ever started playing in the Pokemon anime. Like, I'm not kidding, when I was a kid I legitimately shed tears over this, and I wouldn't be mad at any adults crying over this either. With all that being said, Ash finally waved Butterfree goodbye and went ahead to continue the rest of his Pokemon adventure. Now, the question a lot of people had in their mind is, when is the next time we were going to see Butterfree? And when more time passed, people started to realize we may never see this Pokemon again, just like Ash's Mankey. Some people even speculating that this Pokemon was dead, but we did actually get to see Butterfree in Pokemon Journeys. But not in the way you think. Near the end of the Pokemon Journeys series, at the end credits of a random episode, we ended up seeing Ash and Butterfree meeting up again at some random location, so we know that Butterfree is all well. And to be honest, this is the perfect closure to Butterfree's story arc in the most nonchalant way ever, instead of making it a big deal. Next up, we got Ash's Pidgeotto, and this Pokemon actually doesn't have that crazy of a story. Ash was a brand new trainer, and right after catching Caterpie, he ended up just catching Pidgeotto after beating it in a Pokemon battle. This Pokemon honestly played more of an older brother role on the team, just being useful when Ash needed it and never really had some crazy character arcs. Throughout the entire first season, Pidgeotto was on Ash's main team, and the most notable thing it did was in the first episode of the Orange Island season, where there were a group of Pidgeys getting attacked by a Sparrow. Ash and the gang wanted to put a stop to this since it wasn't right, and Ash sent out Pidgeotto, and Pidgeotto was getting absolutely destroyed by Sparrow. All this battling eventually ended up causing Pidgeotto to evolving into a Pidgeot, and with its newfound power, it was able to protect all of its new friends and beat the Sparrow, but unfortunately, Ash had to let Pidgeotto go since they wanted to say goodbye and protect the rest of the Pidgeys to make sure they don't get into any more gang wars. We did end up seeing this Pokemon again at the very end of Pokemon Journeys, where this Pokemon came in and saved Ash, and Ash said hi, but Pidgeot never actually joined Ash's team officially again. It was kind of like a pretty cool cameo to send off this Pokemon. Next up is Bulbasaur, being the first Kanto starter Ash finds in the Pokemon story. Bulbasaur's story starts off in the beginning of the first season of the Pokemon anime, where Ash is a new trainer and he only has 3 Pokemon on his team: Pikachu, Pidgeotto, and Butterfree. While the gang is roaming, trying to get to Vermilion City, they get lost in the forest. Ash and Misty have a competition on who's gonna catch an Oddish, and Misty completely bodies this Oddish with her Sturmry, and right before she's about to catch this Pokemon, Bulbasaur comes out of nowhere and slaps that Pokeball out the way, letting Ash and Misty know to get off of his turf and not catch his Pokemon. Since Bulbasaur is the leader of this forest, and he really hates it when humans come by, since he sees them as only doing bad things, either coming in and trying to catch his Pokemon or ruin his community, so Bulbasaur just hates all humans. And to add insult to injury, when Ash whips out his Pokédex to learn more about this Pokemon, the Pokédex starts yapping, saying they don't know if Bulbasaur is a Pokemon or a plant. This obviously gets Bulbasaur mad, and he one-shots Misty Sturmry. Ash jumped into the mix wanting to catch Bulbasaur, so he sends out Butterfree trying to use sleep powder to put Bulbasaur to sleep, but Bulbasaur's not having none of that and used the wind against Butterfree and put Butterfree to sleep and one-shotted him. This Bulbasaur is OP. Through all this commotion that was going on, the Oddish that Misty was originally trying to catch ended up dipping, and Bulbasaur followed afterwards. They got away. Ash and the gang wanted to follow this Bulbasaur since they didn't want to let him get away, which led them to a bridge. Brock lets the gang know that he does not see a bridge on the map that he's looking on, and right as he says that, the bridge ends up collapsing. This Bulbasaur created a fake bridge to try to kill these kids. Brock was holding on to the bridge and ended up falling into the river. Ash and Misty were the only two left on the bridge and ended up climbing out, escaping Bulbasaur's trap, but Brock is now gone. Ash and Misty set out to try to find Brock, and while Misty was walking, she steps into a pre-placed frost trap, making Misty fall into the hole. Ash helps Misty up, but they start noticing that it's getting really suspicious how many traps are getting placed around them. They continue going on further, and Ash and Misty end up stepping on a vine in the ground, being trapped into a net. Bulbasaur has captured Ash, Misty, and Pikachu. Now, I won't lie, if I were them, I'd be pretty salty since this Bulbasaur is up 3-0 against us. But the question still remains, why is Bulbasaur trying so hard to prevent these trainers from following him? Bulbasaur leaves the gang out to dry and gives them one last warning to stop following them. A few hours pass and Brock comes around the corner and frees up Ash and Misty. They end up asking Brock what happened to him since last they saw of him he fell down the bridge into a river, and Brock ends up admitting that a random girl came and saved his life from drowning in the river. And I'm not overlooking into this, Brock admits he was going to die if this girl didn't save him. I forgot how harsh this first season of the Pokemon anime was. Brock ends up leading the gang back to the girl's house, and her name is Melanie, and Melanie is actually considered one of the only humans that is the protector of this village. In this village, injured or abandoned Pokemon come and stay so that they can recover and go back into the wild. Melanie makes the gang promise that they're not going to capture any Pokemon in this forest since they're really just trying to vibe, relax, and recover. And Misty went up to Oddish and apologized for the earlier encounter. And as Misty was apologizing, Bulbasaur came out of nowhere and tackled Misty onto the ground. Ash and Misty were seriously wondering what's wrong with this Bulbasaur, so Ash escalates the situation further by talking trash to Bulbasaur, saying he was going to beat his ass anyways, and Bulbasaur ran away. And as the scrap was about to go down, Melanie got into the middle of them and told them to just stop and be friends, and Melanie doesn't want to see a trainer or a Pokemon fight. Bulbasaur, being super uncomfortable with trainers being here, tried to push Ash and Misty out of the forest since he really doesn't want them being here, and he just thinks that all these trainers are gonna come and ruin what's good for them. The show makes it evidently clear that Bulbasaur is having severe symptoms of PTSD, because throughout Bulbasaur's entire life, he's been designated as the leader of this forest to protect all the Pokemon. And from Bulbasaur's perspective, anytime a human has came around into this forest, it's only been bad news, where the human either comes and captures a Pokemon, taking him away from the home, or humans abuse Pokemon, making them have to stay at this place and seek refuge away from humans. Even though Elaine tries to tell Bulbasaur that these humans may be different, Bulbasaur's theory gets proven again because Team Rocket pulls up out of nowhere again and does their normal Team Rocket shenanigans. Ash ends up beating them, sending Team Rocket away from the village, and it actually gave Bulbasaur an extreme amount of respect for Ash, since this is the first time in Bulbasaur's life he's actually seen a human stick up for Pokemon and protect everyone from the village. Elaine lets Ash know that the main reason why she does her job working in this village is because she loves seeing Pokemon grow up and go back into the wild or find a strong trainer that bonds with them and is really nice with them. And Elaine feels that Bulbasaur would be a perfect fit for Ash. She ends up gifting Bulbasaur to Ash, saying that Bulbasaur would be a really great fit on Ash's team and he shows really good qualities as a Pokemon trainer. Ash and Bulbasaur get into a mini Pokemon fight, but Ash ends up ultimately catching Bulbasaur, adding him on the team as the first Kanto starter on Ash's team. And you would think that would be the end of this story, right? Bulbasaur gives up his role as the leader of the village and joins Ash's team, and they travel and become the best of friends, but this story actually gets a lot more complicated. In later episodes of the Pokemon anime, Ash ends up capturing Charmander and Squrtile, and they all end up becoming really great friends with Bulbasaur, even in later episodes having a group hug with Ash when they thought they were gonna die in a snowy forest. Later on in the future episode, Ash's Pokemon gets stranded on an island of giant Pokemon, and in this episode, all the Pokemon can actually talk, and they end up talking about feelings towards their trainers. Ash's Pokemon end up saying that they really like him, but Bulbasaur actually feels like Ash had abandoned him and tells the group that he's scared of this abandonment. Squrtile ends up reassuring Bulbasaur that Ash would never abandon them, and at the end of the episode when they reunite with Ash, Bulbasaur and Squirtle's friendship grew very, very strong, and they became the best of friends throughout the rest of the series. Charmander got left out of this bromance trio though, since when Charmander evolved into Charmeleon, he got a really bad attitude which completely destroyed his friendship with Bulbasaur, and they never really hanged out like that again. Because of the devastating effects that the once innocent Charmander had on the team being a bratty Charizard, Bulbasaur actually never wanted to evolve since he feared that he would end up being exactly like Charizard, not listening to Ash, and he really liked Ash as a trainer and didn't want to disappoint Ash in the future and become a brat just like Charmander if he evolves. This ideology from Bulbasaur had some serious consequences, because in a later episode where Bulbasaur was versing a Rhyhorn, he got hit and almost lost the battle. And the battle had to pause because Bulbasaur got a mysterious bump over his head and the bulge on his back started glowing. Ash rushed Bulbasaur to the Pokemon Center since he was super confused about what was going on with his Pokemon, but Bulbasaur knew deep inside that he's been suppressing his evolution for a while. When Nurse Joy took a look at Bulbasaur, she even let Ash know that Bulbasaur is ready to evolve, and a bunch of Bulbasaurs gathered during this day to evolve in a group. Ash was super hyped about this news and couldn't wait to see Bulbasaur's evolution. Bulbasaur was overhearing all of this and he was conflicted. He didn't want to evolve since he really just wanted to be strong as a Bulbasaur, but he knew it would make his trainer happy. So later that night, Bulbasaur snuck out. And while he was sneaking out, Pikachu noticed him and followed him. Pikachu and Bulbasaur ended up having a really heart-to-heart conversation on a hill where Bulbasaur and Pikachu were talking about their feelings about evolution and how they both really don't want to evolve since they're both in the same boat. They just want to be strong the way they are. And as Bulbasaur came to this realization, out of nowhere a herd of Bulbasaurs came out with their vines and kidnapped our Bulbasaur, taking him away. Pikachu rushed back to the Pokemon Center and woke up Ash, letting him know Bulbasaur has been kidnapped. Ash, Misty, and Brock run into the forest to try to find Bulbasaur, and when they enter, vines behind them shut them in. From the distance, Ash and the gang were observing the ritual that were going on. All the Bulbasaur were chanting and making this big tree grow and blossom into a cherry tree. And when the tree blossomed, the King Venusaur came out and blessed the rest of the Bulbasaurs with their presence. They all started singing and chanting, and all the Bulbasaurs started forcefully evolving into Ivysaurs because it's a part of their ritual where all the Bulbasaurs gathered to evolve. All of them were evolving except one, Ash's Bulbasaur. This is one of the first Pokemon in the series that we ever see actively resist a forceful evolution. The King Venusaur takes note of this and asks Bulbasaur what's going on, and in their Pokemon language, Bulbasaur basically tells the King Venusaur he doesn't want to evolve. They start beefing back and forth, and all the Ivysaurs start surrounding Bulbasaur. They're pissed because in their eyes, Bulbasaur ruined the evolution festival by not evolving. This Venusaur got so mad that he said, nah, I'm not listening to this Bulbasaur any longer, and whipped out a Vine Whip to try to execute the Bulbasaur, but Ash finally came out of hiding and tanked the shot for Bulbasaur. Ash starts letting all the Venusaurs know that you just can't force evolution onto somebody, and if Bulbasaur wants to stay a Bulbasaur, he can, and he's fine just the way he is. Ash also goes up to Bulbasaur and apologizes for encouraging him to evolve since he wasn't really thinking about his feelings, and Ash was only thinking about becoming a strong trainer, not the Pokemon. You'd think the King Venusaur would actually understand where Ash was coming from, but he kind of just stared at Ash like he was having a yap session, but then Team Rocket came into the mix and kidnapped all the Venusaurs and Ivysaurs, and then our Bulbasaur chooses to use the move Solar Beam. And if you didn't know how significant this is, Bulbasaur only learns this move at level 36, meaning he is able to skip the Ivysaur evolution and go straight to a Venusaur. So this Bulbasaur is really like that. After all this, Bulbasaur finally gained the respect of the King Venusaur, and they shook hands and went their separate ways. Now this moment can be seen as one of the last times of Bulbasaur's character development throughout the Kanto region, because after this, the only significant plot points of his story is helping Ash out in the Indigo League, which as we all know, he ultimately lost. But we shouldn't sleep on my boy Bulbasaur, because in the Johto region, he actually went kinda crazy. Since around this time, Ash had already released Squrtile and Bulbasaur, so Bulbasaur had all the attention he wanted to be the star of the team. And when you have a Bulbasaur that can use Solar Beam whenever he wants, the looks would be pretty deceiving, because you may think it's a weak Bulbasaur, but he can basically one-shot your entire team, which he did in the Johto region a lot. Ash's Bulbasaur now took on the role of being the mediator on Ash's team, always bringing in the balance, and even had a pretty funny gag with Ash's Heracross where he try to eat Bulbasaur, which we get into sketchy territory if we start looking deeper into it. Bulbasaur's role as the mediator got so big it actually led to his downfall. In a later episode where Ash goes back to the Oak's lab, Bulbasaur breaking up the dispute between all the lab Pokemon at Oak's lab, since apparently when Ash is gone and there's no Pokemon around, everyone just starts beefing. This actually made Ash and Professor Oak realize that Bulbasaur would actually be better off staying at the lab, being able to bring balance like the Avatar here instead of traveling on long journeys with Ash, since if they're gone for long periods of time, chaos will come loose. And that's kind of how Bulbasaur lost his spot on the team. He ended up doing the original goal when we first met him of protecting Pokemon around him and being a leader. Bulbasaur never had a central spot on Ash's team again. Yes, he did pop out from time to time in the Johto League and even in the Unova region and in Pokemon Journeys where the trio all links up again for old time's sakes, but it was never that central spotlight that Bulbasaur had throughout the early Johto seasons and the Kanto region. I do believe this was a bit of a writer's nerf since they didn't want to have Ash using the exact same Pokemon forever and they needed a reason to write Bulbasaur out of the story and keep Pikachu as like Ash's main Kanto Pokemon. But easily, the star of Kanto had to be Charizard, having one of the most complex stories in the Pokemon anime. But to understand where this all started, we have to take it back to Season 1 of the Pokemon anime. This season takes place in the Kanto region, where Ash is our main character on his very first Pokemon journey, and for lack of a better words, he's dumb. He's an inexperienced new 10-year-old trainer that doesn't know how to raise Pokemon. But the thing about Ash is that he's a kid with a heart, and when he sees a dying Pokemon out in the rain, he's gonna go save him, and that's exactly what happened to Charmander. Early on Ash's journey, he meets Charmander on a rock. He looks pretty sick and sad, but he won't move at all. Ash tries to catch this Charmander and bring him to a Pokemon Center since he's sick and clearly needs help, but Charmander refuses to move from this rock, let alone getting caught. After multiple unsuccessful attempts to save the Charmander's life, Pikachu comes over and lets the gang know that Charmander says that it actually has an owner and it's waiting for him to return. Skeptical, the gang stays over at a local place to keep watch at Charmander, waiting for its owner to return. When the gang pulls up at this spot, they meet Damien. They overhear him talking about how he abandoned a Charmander because he was too weak. And this is just crazy to me, because imagine in real life if you pull up to a hotel and a group of people are flexing that they beat and abandoned their dog. With Ash and Brock being the only two sensible people in the room, Brock goes up to Damien and presses him. Brock tells Damien he should go back and get his Pokemon because he's going to die since it's raining outside, and when Charmanders lose the fire on their tail, they die. Damien just doesn't seem to care, so Ash, Brock, and Misty go out and rescue Charmander. When they finally find Charmander, they find that he's getting beaten to death by an army of sparrows. Pikachu uses Thunder Shock on the sparrows, and they wrap Charmander in a blanket to preserve the fire on his tail so he doesn't die. Charmander is holding on to his life. They manage to bring Charmander to Nurse Joy, and she heals him right up. But later that night, Charmander escapes because he is shocked that Damien actually abandoned him. Charmander unfortunately develops Stockholm Syndrome, where despite the abuse Damien has done towards him, he still wants to go back to Damien since it feels like home. And to be honest, Damien is a straight bum. To hurt such a powerful and loyal Pokemon like this, especially in the Kanto region, Damien definitely fumbled for whatever trash he has on his team. While Charmander was roaming around, he encounters Team Rocket, which has just captured Pikachu. Charmander uses Flamethrower to defeat Team Rocket and free up Pikachu, repaying his debt to Ash. And this bum Damien was lurking around the corner, saw how powerful Charmander really is, and switched up, saying he wanted to get Charmander back on his team. Damien started gaslighting Charmander into believing that he was searching for Charmander the entire time and that he was coming back. Charmander is sick of the lies and refuses to join Damien's team. Damien gets salty and cusses out Charmander by telling him that he was never coming back for him and that he's weak and worthless. Charmander gets his get back by hitting Damien with a flamethrower and joining Ash's team in the end, since Ash was the only nice trainer to him. And that should be the end of that story, right? Ash saves Charmander from his abusive trainer, Charmander joins Ash's team, they get along, are loyal, and become the best of friends and a star Pokemon of Ash's team. But not all stories have the best endings. While Charmander was traveling along Ash's team, he was actually pretty grateful to be on the squad and helped Ash a lot and listened like all the other Pokemon. They even had a really wholesome moment where Ash was stranded in a cave due to a blizzard, and Charmander saved him and all the other Pokemon's lives by keeping them warm because of the fire on his tail. Ever since then, Charmander seriously became Ash's #1 Pokemon. He consistently used them throughout every episode, defeating tons of Pokemon he seriously shouldn't have beaten, like this Golem, and he was seriously getting way ahead of level compared to all of Ash's Pokemon. Charmander could honestly 1v5 them. Because of Charmander's proficient dominance on Ash's team, there's an episode where they go to a city with a bunch of Executors. Charmander uses Flamethrower and defeats a bunch of Executors, giving him a lot of XP, which caused him to evolve into Charmeleon. At first, this would be seen as a good thing, since Pokemon evolving is always good, right? But the once innocent, loyal, and strong Charmander we once knew was now gone, since Charmeleon didn't care about Ash anymore. This was the start of his downfall.
If you've only watched the Pokemon anime, you may have been confused on why Ash's Charmeleon didn't want to listen to him anymore after evolving, but if you played the Pokemon games, you may know this feeling all too well. In the Pokemon games, there's a mechanic where the number of gym badges you have as a trainer directly correlates to how strong of a Pokemon you can use. This is to prevent new trainers from using super high level Pokemon they really should have access to, and that's basically what happened to Ash. Charmeleon redeemed Ash unworthy of his power and just stopped listening to him. In Charmeleon's eyes, things are gonna work on his term and his terms only, and he doesn't really care what Ash has to say. Charmeleon's rebellious phase was getting out of control, and Ash came to realize this. Along their journey, Ash wanted to help another trainer evolve their Paris, and he sent out Charmeleon to have a friendly battle. Keyword friendly. Charmeleon just didn't care at all and wanted all the smoke and completely went overboard with this Paris. After that mishap, Charmeleon shot his fire at Ash. It got so bad, Ash had to send out Pikachu to deal with Charmeleon to prove that he's not that guy. Ash was pretty sad about this, since his once beloved Charmander that was once a staple on his team is such a bratty Charmeleon that wouldn't even listen to a single instruction. Ash decided to give Charmeleon one last chance against Paris to help him evolve, and when he sends out Charmeleon, he went even crazier, and if he did not bump into Paris's poison needle, that Paris would have been dead. After that, Ash had to decide to make Charmeleon take a bit of a backseat for now and let him chill off and figure out what's actually going on with this Pokemon. And that was it for Charmeleon. Ash made the smart decision to not bring out Charmeleon for a very long time, and the only time Charmeleon saw the light of day is when Ash was in a life or death situation and had to bring out one of his final Pokemon, Charmeleon. Ash was being chased by fossil Pokemon that wanted to kill him, and when Charmeleon finally came out, he just looked there smug. He didn't care about Ash's life, he didn't care about this situation, and he low-key just wanted to sleep. One of the fossil Pokemon, Aerodactyl, was a menace and kidnapped Ash and Pikachu and swatted Charmeleon on the way out. This hurt Charmeleon's ego so bad it challenged Aerodactyl to a 1v1. Aerodactyl didn't really view Charmeleon as anything and just emoted on him again, and this pissed off Charmeleon a lot, evolving him into the Charizard we know today. And this Charizard was a beast. It was so powerful it was able to defeat Aerodactyl and even save Ash. For a moment, Ash thought that everything was back to normal. Its Charizard saved him from the bottom of his heart because its trainer was in trouble, but in reality, Charizard only evolved because its ego got hurt, not because Ash got kidnapped. So, nothing really changed with Ash and Charizard's dynamic. Charizard was still at the back of Ash's team as his wild card and not the forefront that he used to be. But this all changed when Ash went to the 7th gym leader. Ash challenged Blaine, the 7th gym leader, to a Pokemon battle, and he sent out his Charizard, a risky move, and Charizard just chilled on the side and he didn't care, up until he saw Blaine's Magmar. This Magmar stopped a volcano crisis, gaining the respect of Charizard, and Charizard challenged him to a 1v1, considering Magmar his first worthy opponent. In this fight, we saw the true power of Charizard. Him and Magmar went head to head, even fighting in lava, and Charizard revealed his signature move, Seismic Toss, ending the battle and proving that he is the strongest fire Pokemon on Blaine's Island. It was nice for Charizard to finally deem someone a worthy opponent and show us how powerful he truly is. To be honest, Charizard must be like level 60 while everyone else is level 40. Ash was then appointed the Fire Gym Badge by Blaine. Finally, maybe something that would be able to prove his worth to Charizard. But even after Ash getting this badge, Charizard did not respect him at all, and it was back to the same old same old. Charizard cannot get over the fact that this 10-year-old kid could improve, and he will always view Ash lower than him. Now, every side has two stories, and we never actually looked at it from Charizard's perspective. How did Charizard develop this ideology? It's simply because of the trauma he got from his old trainer. Charizard got abandoned because he was considered weak and not good enough, and now that he finally has the power and is strong and can body practically anybody, he's scared that if he becomes complacent and listens to a trainer like Ash, it'll end up making him weak and he'll get abandoned all over again, repeating the cycle. So we didn't see Charizard for a while, and the only other Pokemon we've ever seen Ash's Charizard fight after that point was Mewtwo and his clone Pokemon, where Mewtwo is obviously the strongest Pokemon in that region, and Charizard had to challenge himself in the Pokemon movie against Mewtwo and the Charizard clone. In this Pokemon movie, if you didn't know, Ash actually died and got turned to stone, and Charizard and the rest of the Pokemon cried, and this is very monumental to Charizard's character, since this is the first time we've seen him show genuine affection towards Ash, since him losing his life is pretty sad. But Ash came back to life and Charizard went back to being his old self. But this brings us to the height of Charizard's career. the Indigo League, a tournament where trainers around the region come together and fight to have a chance to verse the Elite Four and proving who's the best of the best in the Kanto region. This is a big moment in Ash's career and an even bigger moment for Charizard since he only wants to verse strong Pokemon, so only strong Pokemon should be here, right? The Indigo League had over 200 participants and Ash brought along Pikachu, Pidgeot, Bulbasaur, Squrtile, Krabby, and Charizard as his 6th Pokemon on his team. And Ash took this tournament super seriously, making it out of the top 200, being one of the finalists in the top 16. And throughout all the battles leading up to this, he didn't use his Charizard once. He knew he was a wild card and wanted to play it safe by using his loyal and reliable Pokemon, which may have been his downfall. For this top 16 round, Ash is going up against a kid named Richie, and they're down to their final Pokemon. Ash only has Charizard left, while Richie has Charmander and Pikachu. And to be honest, how did this kid even make it to the top 16 with his weak team? But I'll digress. Ash takes the risk and sends out his Charizard in front of thousands of people at the live tournament event. And Charizard listened to Ash. He actually defeated Richie's Charmander with ease since Charizard is way stronger than Richie's entire team. But then Richie sends out his star Pokemon, Pikachu, or Zippy. Charizard was far from impressed from his matchup. He has the power to beat this Pikachu, but he's just disappointed that this is what everything was leading up to, him versing a couple first and second stage level Pokemon, rather than him fighting strong Pokemon like the Magmar he met back at Blaine's Island. So instead of Charizard swiftly taking care of this Pikachu so they can fight stronger trainers the farther they go up in the tournament, he chooses the nuclear option. Charizard throws it all away at the height of his career and refuses to battle. Charizard's actions resulted in Ash getting eliminated from the Indigo League, the thing that they were working up for so long, all over his pride.
Now that's where the story would have ended for most trainers, including myself. If I got that amount of disrespect in front of a tournament, that lizard is off my team. But that's not where it ended for Ash. Ash still had a little bit of hope in Charizard and kept him on his team. He didn't treat him any differently, he was patient with him and worked with him. In the Orange Islands the next season after the Indigo League, there was a glimmer of hope for Charizard. Ash was versing a pretty strong Poliwrath and sends out Charizard, but Charizard doesn't want to listen until Charizard gets one up by the Poliwrath, getting frozen and defeated. This was one of the first times Charizard felt true defeat. He lost a fight because of his own incompetence, even though Ash trusted him. But Ash didn't dwell on Charizard's loss at all. He was actually more concerned about Charizard's health since he took on a full Ice Beam from the Poliwrath and is potentially dangerous for Charizard. Ash stayed up all night healing Charizard, being with him and keeping him warm, and Charizard realized that Ash really did care for him and Ash wanted the best for him and didn't care if he won or lost. So since Charizard finally saw the good in Ash, he threw away his abusive past with Damien and looked forward towards the future with Ash. And when they teamed up, they were stronger than ever. The next day when they were working together, they bodied the Poliwrath and Charizard finally swore his allegiance to Ash as his loyal Pokemon, and they were unstoppable. Charizard was the Luka Doncic of the Pokemon League. This guy was unstoppable ever since they teamed up, and they even won the Orange Islands together. Things were finally looking consistently up for this lizard. No one was really a challenge for Ash and Charizard, and they even went to the Johto region, and that was even easier for Charizard. He had basically no threats throughout the Johto region at all. Word was spreading around fast that Ash was a trainer that was able to tame this powerful Charizard, that they got invited to the Charizard Valley, and everything changed from that point. The Charizard Valley is a place where only the best Charizards live. They eat, sleep, fight alongside each other to only improve as a Charizard. Liza is the leader of this valley, and she wanted to test Ash's Charizard skills to see where he compares with the rest of the Charizards. And Ash's Charizard was the weakest in the room. Seriously, there was not one Charizard that he was stronger than in that valley. They even wanted to test Ash's skills as a trainer to see if he knew how to fly with Charizard, and they were incapable of even flying together. Charizard was just a stroke of dumb luck, fighting low elo people, and when he finally got to the big leagues, it showed that he wasn't as good as he really thought he was. Once Liza saw Ash's Charizard's performance, she actually banished him from the kingdom since she did not think he was worthy at all from training there or even being around these Charizards. Charizard spent that entire night reflecting in the water on how to improve and become a better Pokemon. Even Team Rocket felt bad for Charizard getting outcasted by his own people, that they helped Charizard get back into the Charizard Valley by staging a Team Rocket attack and making Charizard be painted as the hero that saved everyone. Because of all of this, Charizard got invited to stay at the Charizard Valley to train and become as strong as possible. And with new opportunities presented with Charizard, that just means some doors have to close. And unfortunately, the door that has to close is Ash traveling with Charizard.
Charizard was pretty down with just denying the offer and still traveling with Ash, but Ash knew what's best for Charizard is to stay with Charizard to get stronger and to be the best that he could possibly be. Charizard was pretty shocked by Ash's response, since he didn't think Ash would want him to go stay with these Charizards, but Ash knew it was for the greater good and left in tears, leaving Charizard behind at the Pacific Valley, promising to meet again as friends. And Ash went on to travel a bunch of other regions and periodically meeting Charizard throughout the way with little cameos, and even in Pokemon Journeys reuniting with their original gang again for old time's sakes. And speaking of the original gang, Squrtile is the last member of the Kanto trio, and his story is quite complex. So far, Ash's journey is looking pretty bright for being a new trainer. He's captured 5 Pokemon: Pikachu, Butterfree, Pidgeot, Bulbasaur, and Charmander, but he's looking for a 6th, preferably a water type. While the gang is roaming through a route, they end up falling for a trap and falling into a hole, and right above them they see a group of Squirtles. Ash gets out of the hole and realizes that they're all Squirtles and says that he actually wants to catch one on his team since he will be able to beat Gary if he had his own Blastoise. Ash sends out Pikachu to deal with them, and Pikachu completely one-shots one of the Squirtles, and the leader of the Squirtle squad ends up having a stare down with Pikachu and makes the executive decision to run away. Officer Jenny pulls up because of all the commotion, and once the gang tells Officer Jenny their story, she lets them all know that this is a group of Squirtles known as the Squirtle Squad. They go around vandalizing, terrorizing, and just being a complete pain in the ass for everybody because they were abandoned by their original trainers many years ago. And not to be rude, but what is up with the Kanto region? Because so far, a bunch of Pokemon have been abused or abandoned by their trainers, so either nobody in the Kanto region cares about Pokemon rights, or everyone there is just plain evil. Officer Jenny proceeds to let the gang know that she actually feels kind of bad for the Squirtles. She believes if they were brought up right and treated properly by humanity, that they would have not ended up this way. And this resonates deeply with Ash, and he wants to befriend the Squirtles and hopefully bring them down on the right path. In the distance, Team Rocket for once is just chilling, and they have a picnic and they're trying to eat their food, but they get jumped by the Squirtle Squad telling them to give them all their food. And when they don't listen, they fall into the Squirtle Squad's traps, and they all end up eating Team Rocket's food anyways. The Squirtle Squad ends up tying up Team Rocket, and when Meowth asks to put them down, the Squirtles let them know that they don't trust them because Meowth is working with humans, and the Squirtle Squad does not rock with humans at all, and they just hate them completely. Then Meowth does a completely big brain play, and he starts acting like Jesse and James are his pets and saying that he actually owns them, and that it's actually a Pokemon-ruled society, not humans, so the Squirtles start trusting Meowth. Jesse and James actually take this as an opportunity to let the Squirtles know that if they do one thing, capturing Ash and Pikachu, that they'll end up giving them unlimited food source and that they're Team Rocket and they have the funding to back it. The Squirtles are weary at first, but they kind of end up trusting them. While the gang is out swimming, Pikachu ends up getting stung by a Goldeen, making him very sick, and out of nowhere, the Squirtle Squad just jumps the gang and ends up tying them up in a rope, and they end up realizing Team Rocket's behind all of this. The Squirtles end up bringing the gang into a cave, leaving them out to dry. And to be honest, watching this makes me question, can you even charge Pokemon with crimes? Because this is just plain kidnapping. Ash lets the Squirtles know that no matter what they do to him, he really needs to go get an antidote for Pikachu since he's really sick. And the leader of the Squirtle Squad actually grows a bit of a heart and lets Ash out on one condition: he has to come back. Ash obviously agrees to these terms since he wants to save Pikachu, and he's set to run free to get an antidote for the sick Pikachu. After roaming for a while, Ash finally finds a shop that can sell him an antidote, and when he's about to go in, Gary just slams the door in Ash's face, knocking him out cold. When Ash wakes up, he can hear Team Rocket inside the building, holding them at gunpoint to get gunpowder. And what is going on in the original season of the Pokemon anime? Because they got guns, robbings, trying to make bombs. This is a crazy season. Ash ends up getting the super potion and ends up coming back to his friends, which have all been untied by the Squirtles, and Misty lets Ash know that the Squirtle Squad actually wasn't going to do anything bad to them since they're not really evil, they just like playing tricks. Ash ends up healing Pikachu, restoring him to a bit of health, but in the distance, Team Rocket's pulling up with bombs. They end up doing the usual, capturing Pikachu and throwing these bombs everywhere, causing a forest fire, and I think they were generally trying to kill these kids, so Squirtle and Ash end up teaming up, running through the bombs and shooting the parachute on Team Rocket's blimp, which ended up saving Pikachu, and this actually helped grow the bond between Ash and the leader of the Squirtle Squad, since the leader realized that some humans can actually be pretty nice, and some Pokemon like Meowth can be pretty evil. The forest is still on fire due to Team Rocket, and all the Squirtle Squad pulls up and ends up putting the fire out with their water.
Due to their bravery of actually sticking up for the townspeople, they end up actually being loved by the town and appointed as their Squirtle Squad firefighters. The gang ends up leaving the town since everything's done, and while they're about to leave, the leader of the Squirtle Squad is still following Ash, and Ash asks him if he wants to join his team. The Squirtle ends up taking off his shades, and we see his eyes for the first time, and he's filled with joy, wanting to actually be a companion to Ash. And ever since then, the rest is history. Squirtle ended up being locked in, and he ended up enjoying the other Pokemon on Ash's team, becoming really great friends, especially with Bulbasaur. The Kanto trio ended up being the dominant force on Ash's team, and they had some really great times together, especially in the episode where Ash got trapped in the snow biome, and it's pretty infamous where Charmander lights up his fire on his tail and warms up all the Pokemon for a group huddle. This moment solidified their unity throughout having everyone together on the team. But in a future episode in an island of giant Pokemon, Ash ends up getting separated from his group of Pokemon, and we get to hear the thoughts of the Pokemon on what they think about their trainers. Bulbasaur was actually pretty negative, thinking Ash had abandoned them and left them for better Pokemon, but Squirtle actually had major trust in Ash, believing that he was going to come back for them, which he did, which really shows how grateful Squirtle is and actually how he's came around from the trauma of being abandoned by whichever previous trainer he had. Later on in the story, where Charmander evolved into Charmeleon and Charizard, he ended up becoming pretty bratty, and this actually ended up shifting the dynamic of the team, putting more spotlight on Bulbasaur and Squirtle, which was pretty good. But we started to see Squirtle was actually one of the weaker Pokemon on Ash's teams, not really winning any gym battles and only just scraping by, just being more of a comedic relief. Now, this isn't confirmed, but I think the show heavily implies it, and it's my own personal theory, I believe too, that the rest of Ash's Pokemon actually didn't want to evolve anymore after seeing how much Charizard's personality changed from the once innocent Charmander to being one of the most brattiest Pokemon and not listening to a single instruction. Because Bulbasaur never actually wanted to evolve into Venusaur, as we know from later episodes, but Squirtle actually found the transformation of Blastoise pretty cool and always admiring him, so I believe at one point Squirtle did want to turn into a Blastoise, but for the rest of the series he chooses to never evolve. As we all know, Ash actually lost the first Indigo League, and Squirtle was low-key a bum in the tournament. He fell asleep to Butterfree and really contributed not that much to the tournament. So when Ash went over to the Orange Island, Squirtle was seriously trying to find a glow-up to actually help Ash on the team. Since Charizard was slowly starting to listen to Ash and he's becoming an ace, and Bulbasaur learned the move Solar Beam, so Squirtle was really falling behind, and he actually learned the move Hydro Pump to pick up the slack and become a threat on Ash's team. Even in a later episode, Squirtle ends up meeting with their group of firefighting war turtles and proving to them that he's a firefighter too and putting out just as much fire as them. Ash ends up winning the Orange Islands with his pretty powerful team and brings Squirtle along to the Johto region. Squirtle was obviously well prepared for this region since he already traveled with Ash throughout the entire Kanto region, and he actually had to take a bit of a backseat along with Ash's Kanto Pokemon to make room for the new Johto Pokemon. But in a later episode where Ash enters a firefighting competition, Squirtle ends up meeting back up with the Squirtle Squad and the War Turtle Squad, and Squirtle ends up vibing really well with them, but the Squirtle Squad actually admits to Squirtle that they actually miss him and they miss having a leader that was in control and could guide them, since Squirtle was the group leader. By the end of the episode, Squirtle made the pretty tough decision to leave Ash's team and end up reuniting with his old friends to go back to the Kanto region and be a firefighter there, since Ash really didn't have that much use for Squirtle and he would be so much more useful saving lives in the Kanto region. After that, Squirtle was never officially on Ash's team again, but he did make some cameos from time to time helping Ash out in the Johto Pokemon League, and we even saw him a bit throughout more series in the Pokemon anime, like in Black and White. We saw him again in the Hoenn region 2, where the gang links up with him again, and most importantly in Pokemon Journeys, where Ash traveled back to Kanto with his original team, and they end up finding Squirtle and realizing that he's gotten super popular. He's a Power Ranger type deal Squirtle, and they end up chatting and having a good time, but Squirtle is now a massive celebrity that goes around the Kanto region saving lives and being a firefighter. The Squirtle story is pretty cool since Squirtle was just a hooligan, but now he's just a world-renowned firefighter helping out a bunch of people in the Kanto region, which is a pretty good life for him. Now, all the Pokemon we've covered so far have had significant character arcs, but some of these other Pokemon kinda got the sideline treatment. Ash ended up catching a Krabby in the 13th episode of the Pokemon anime at a beach, and it ended up evolving into a Kingler and eventually having some good battles, but Ash never really put this Pokemon to crazy use. Mankey is a pretty interesting Pokemon that Ash caught because he has the record of having the least anime appearances of Ash's Pokemon. Ash caught him in episode 29 trying to help him to become a better fighter. Then Ash ended up giving him away to a Pokemon trainer to end up winning a fighting competition that
Ash had already won. And the second Ash evolved this Pokemon into a Primeape to be a pretty cool Pokemon, and we never saw this Pokemon again. We still don't know if Ash ever came back for this Primeape. Muck is a Pokemon that I personally don't really like, but I will mention that Ash did catch him in episode 30 in the Pokemon anime, and he had a pretty annoying gimmick with Ash where he always tried to like hug him to death and kind of killing Ash, but not really, I don't know. In a banned episode in the Pokemon anime, Ash ended up catching 30 Tauroses in the Safari Zone, so it's pretty hard to get to know all 30 of them, but he's used them from time to time throughout many Pokemon battles. One of the coolest Pokemon that I've seen Ash have, but he never really caught, was his Haunter. This was a Pokemon Ash found that ended up helping him win a gym badge, and I really wish Ash ended up keeping this Haunter, but it doesn't hurt that badly since Ash ended up getting a Gengar in Pokemon Journeys, and even though he caught him many seasons later, he's a Kanto Pokemon, so I'm going to include his story here. But to understand all this, we have to take it back to Ash's journey in the Galar region, where there's a haunted house. When one of the professors was working late at night, the power just suddenly went out. Confused, the professor went with his Magnemite to the basement to check if the power circuits blew a fuse, and when they made it to the basement, they got jumped by a Gengar. In the morning, Ash and the gang were wondering where did the professor's assistant go, so they ended up pulling up to his house and realized that his ass was still knocked out on the floor from the Gengar. Suddenly, all the Pokemon around them start getting super scared, and they realize that Gengar is still here and he wants violence. Pikachu, being the most experienced in the group, uses Thunderbolt on Gengar, completely one-shotting him, and he fades into the floor, disappearing. Some time passes and Ash and Go are still wondering why did the Gengar knock out the professor, so they go back to the house to try to find him. They bring Yamper along with them, and he's sniffing around the floor, and he ends up getting Gengar's scent and exposing his location. And when they meet up again, it's on sight. Gengar immediately throws a Shadow Ball at them, but Pikachu is just like that and cuts it in half with his Iron Tail. So Gengar decides to go for a cheap shot using Ice Punch on the poor Yamper, freezing him. In the end, Gengar and Yamper had one final clash to decide the battle, where Yamper ultimately came out on top, kicking Gengar out of the haunted house. Everyone was happy, but the question was on everybody's mind: why was Gengar attacking humans? And the answer to that isn't so nice. In the past, Gengar used to belong to another trainer, and this trainer wasn't very good. He wasn't able to win any Pokemon battles, and he blamed everyone around him but himself. But in Gengar's eyes, it didn't matter because he completely loved his trainer since he was the only one to ever give him the time of day. Even though Gengar felt like this, his trainer believed that he was cursed by owning a Gengar, so he did the unthinkable. One night, he brought Gengar to the mansion that we found him at, and he told Gengar to wait here and that he better not leave because he'll be back. And Gengar trusted his trainer because why would he lie? He thought his trainer loved him too. So Gengar decided to wait like he was told, and then minutes turned into hours. Hours turned into days. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. Gengar was still patiently waiting for his trainer. Even after all that, Gengar was still optimistic because he still believed that his trainer would come back, and he just kept thinking about all the good times he had with his trainer. It got so bad to the point that when anyone would come and visit the mansion, Gengar would get really excited because he thought it was going to be his trainer, but he was just disappointed because it wasn't him. Gengar also went invisible anytime a human came around because he wanted to only be seen by his trainer. The buildup became too much, and Gengar, while he was invisible, started destroying some parts of the house, making people believe that the house was haunted. And eventually, Gengar realized the full truth, that his trainer had abandoned him and that he was never coming back, which leads us to the present day. When Ash was in the laboratory working, Gengar pulled up and started haunting the entire place, trying to get a reaction out of Ash, but Ash didn't really give it to him and really just wanted to get to know Gengar. Gengar, still being skeptical of humans, started following Ash in secret, being his shadow. Throughout the days, Ash noticed he was getting a lot more sick. He couldn't even eat food anymore, and this was because Gengar was haunting Ash in secret. Ash decided to go on a run because he thought fresh air would make him feel better, and Gengar decided to follow him, and on this run, Ash ended up bumping into a trainer. When the trainer got up, his girlfriend came over to him making a joke saying is he still cursed. The guy says he hasn't been cursed in over 3 years since he got rid of the terrible Gengar he had long ago, and now he's got a girlfriend, money, and he's living his best life. He went on a rant saying that his old Gengar's presence was so terrible and he's happy that he got rid of him. He ends off his rant by saying that he wished he never caught Gengar anyways, and Gengar heard every single word of this, and it completely broke him. He came out of the shadows wanting violence. He shot multiple Shadow Balls at his own trainers with the intention to hurt him, and Pikachu ended up using Electro Web to stop the Shadow Balls. Ash tried to give the trainer one chance to apologize to the Gengar, saying that maybe he could talk it out and make Gengar feel better. And you would think he would use this opportunity to be nice, but he ended up doubling down, telling Gengar to stay away from him. This is exactly what he's talking about, and he told Gengar to stay at that haunted house because he doesn't deserve to be around him since since he only causes bad luck. The trainer ends up running away, and this just leaves Gengar more confused since he finally got the answers that he wanted, but it just wasn't what he expected, so Gengar ran away. Ended up encountering Team Rocket, and they tried doing their usual shenanigans trying to recruit Gengar onto the team, but Gengar doesn't trust any humans, so he doesn't want to join Team Rocket and he just wants to be by himself. Team Rocket ends up capturing Gengar in a vacuum cleaner to force him to be on Team Rocket. I don't know, they didn't really think this through. But Ash came around the corner in the end, and Pikachu used Iron Tail, freeing up Gengar and telling Gengar that even though his old trainer was so mean and abusive towards him, that he actually cares for Gengar and he wants him on his side. So Gengar decides to trust in Ash and they blast off Team Rocket. And Ash and Gengar became pretty good friends. So much to the point where Gengar actually wanted to join Ash's team as one of his Pokemon. And of course, Ash accepted this, and the rest was history. Ash and Gengar became the best of friends. And you would think the story ends here, right? Ash tried to help Gengar overcome the trauma with his abusive trainer, and Gengar now is on a new trainer's team. But the story actually gets a little more complicated for Gengar. The more these two traveled together, Gengar loved to play tricks and pranks on Ash, paying homage to the Haunter Ash had so long ago back in the first season of the Pokemon anime. But Gengar wasn't meant for jokes, he meant serious business. He helped Ash defeat a bunch of trainers, and for some reason Gengar had the most beef with electric type Pokemon since Gengar went up against a Raichu one time and completely showed them why he's the king, and even helped Ash when he was versing Volkner to verse his Luxray. And even though Gengar didn't win, he did put up a crazy fight. And this is all leading up for them to fight in the Masters 8. The top 8 trainers that have been nominated throughout all the Pokemon regions are going to get together and have a big tournament, so Ash wanted to be prepared. So he got all his Pokemon together, new and old, to start training so Ash could have one of the strongest teams possible. Ash realized that his Gengar would actually relate a lot to his Fire-type Pokemon on his team, since they have similar backstories, since every single one of Ash's Fire-type starters for some reason have had abusive trainers. Like, I'm not kidding about this either. The only Fire-type starter Ash had that didn't get abused was Cyndaquil because he was just a wild Pokemon, but everyone else has a pretty sad backstory. While Gengar is training with the rest of the Pokemon, Ash encounters Paul again, who says he wants to challenge Ash to a battle to see if he's worthy to be in the top 8. So it would be Gengar versus Metagross. The one problem was Gengar didn't really have any moves to deal with Metagross, so he trained really hard with all of Ash's Fire-type Pokemon to learn the move Will-O-Wisp, which is a really good Fire-type move for Ghost-type Pokemon to have. Infernape was one of Gengar's main mentors, passing down this teaching, and it's pretty poetic since Infernape was abused by Paul, so now he's making his student learn moves so he can beat Paul, showing the full circle that this journey of Pokemon have came. But that's all I have to speak on for Infernape for now, since he'll get his own video in the future. Gengar ended up challenging Metagross, and it went very well. He ended up taking all the teachings the Fire-type Pokemon taught him and was able to defeat Paul, and all the Fire-type Pokemon were so happy with Gengar being the true successor of the Fire-type Pokemon on Ash's team. And with that, there was only one more thing Gengar had to master before the big tournament, Gigantamax. This is a new form in the Galar region where Pokemon get really big, and in terms of Gengar, he even gets a whole new look. In the past, when Ash versed Volcanor, he actually tried to Gigantamax against him, but him and Gengar failed. He just became really big, but he didn't get the new form they were looking for. So Ash put his head down, went to some Ghost-type masters, and they gave Gengar Gigantamax Soup, because apparently Soup will help him master the form, and I don't doubt the process because it definitely did. When he went to the arena, we were finally able to see what Ash's Gigantamax Gengar looked like, and we were ready for the top 8 battle, where the best of the best were going to fight. But before Ash could get to fight people like Leon, he was fighting people like Marine and her Grimmsnarl, and Gengar was going head to head, dodging a bunch of the Gigantamax attacks, so Gengar had to match the same energy by transforming for the first time in the battle to Gigantamax Gengar, and he was a complete beast, being able to hold his own and use deadly attacks. And when Grimmsnarl was trying to finish off Gengar with Darkest Lariat, he did something that I would have never thought I saw in the Pokemon anime. Gengar ate Grimmsnarl and spat him out. In the end, Ash ended up winning this battle and used Gengar in a bunch of fights to make it to the Masters 8, but when it was the finals with Ash versus Leon, Gengar was very useful. It was Gengar versus Inteleon. Gengar was dodging a bunch of attacks by facing to the floor, but he didn't want to get hit by a super effective attack, so he Gigantamax quick quickly and use Giant Terror on Inteleon. Gengar ended up restraining Inteleon and using what I can only classify as a domain expansion on the arena, capturing Inteleon and completely knocking her out. Gengar helped Ash defeat a champion's Pokemon, and even though seconds later Mr. Rime came out and one-shotted Gengar, Ash ended up winning this battle against Leon, being crowned as a champion. With that happening, Gengar was so happy because he finally had everything he wanted. He was loved by a trainer and he was able to be on top of the world, coming from basically nothing to now being one of the top dogs in his universe. And with that, it always does make me wonder, how do these trainers feel when they end up abandoning these Pokemon and they end up going on historical runs with Ash? Because I would be pretty salty. In the end, Gengar ended up staying on Ash's team and hanging around with the Fire-type Pokemon since he resonated best with them. This story really does show how a Pokemon who was basically set up for failure can just shine and rise to the occasion when given the proper chance. Overall, Ash's Kanto team has to be one of the most memorable teams ever. In the Orange Islands, Ash went ahead to catch Snorlax and Lapras, and these were incredibly goated Pokemon, but they're gonna get their entire own videos in the future. And speaking of full videos, I got two amazing stories on Incineroar or Greninja on their incredible journeys with Ash that just didn't happen to be in the Kanto region, so watch those videos.